today is Veterans Day. And I wanted to just, to make a mention of it, to say to all of our veterans who are listening, all the people in our lives, thank you for your service.
You bet.
It's so incredibly important. Do you know the history of Veterans Day? I'm assuming you do, to mark the end of World War I.
Yeah.
Armistice Day originally.
Day, yeah.
And then they eventually turned it into, after World War II, they adopted, I think in the 1950s, to recognize all veterans of all wars.
And it's much different than Memorial Day, which is just to honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice.
To honor those who
Lincoln.
passed away, yeah.
Right. Veterans Day is everybody, every day, who have currently and previously served to keep all of us safe and free, and to fight for the things that we sometimes take for granted. The things
we almost always take it for granted. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's what this day to me kind of marks. I was thinking about this morning. It's like 5 words, right? Thank you for your service. It's a very simple thing. We see people that we know have served in the military, and we don't say it sometimes. I don't know why that is. Like it's passé or something. And that used to be something that I was almost embarrassed to say to people who were in the armed services when I was younger, because I was not in the military, and I felt like, well, who am I to say thank you? But as the older and older I get, not that I didn't appreciate it, just like I was almost like I didn't do it, and so I didn't want to. I can't even explain why I didn't do it.
Okay.
It just doesn't even make sense. But the older and older I get, the more I am grateful for the service that people in the military have given us and protected our country.
Yeah, that's just wisdom. That's experience in life. That's seeing the things in your life and recognizing what matters, what makes a difference to not just you and your family, but to everybody that you know and don't know. The little things that make big differences. Like
when I'm young, when I'm 18 or 17 or something, I don't want it to feel like a passé thing, and so maybe I don't say it because I don't want them to think that I'm afraid to.
It's just lip service. You don't want to come across as lip service.
Yeah, because I didn't serve, and so I didn't want it to feel like lip service. But then now, as I get older and I have my sons, and I think of how incredibly blessed we are to be in America, and all the people who have fought to protect those freedoms that we have. And I'm not just saying, I'm not just paying lip service here. This actually means something. And I think back to my grandpa. Like, my grandpa was in World War II, and he was a pilot in World War II. And I think about what they were asked to do in World War II and what they did at that age. Like, I was texting my mom this morning. I said, Mom, how old was Grandpa when he was flying in World War II? He was a pilot. How old was he? And I think my memory was he was 21. She goes, no, he was 19.
No kidding. 19.
You're sent off to save the world at 19, and he flew a B-24, which was it was called the Flying Coffin. Did you know that about that plane? So he flew a plane called the B-24. It was a flying coffin. And the reason they called it the Flying Coffin is there was only one entry point. It was in the tail of the plane. So the majority of the crew in the plane, if there was something wrong, had a very difficult time getting out.
Right.
And there was a lot of those planes that were shot down in World War II. So they made 14,000 of them. 6,000 of them were shot down or didn't complete their service in World War II. And my grandpa, his plane was shot down. Actually, they actually had some issues. They were in France. They had to ditch the plane, and so they made the decision to ditch the plane. And the cool thing about the story is we never would have known it were it not for my sister when she was very young. She had an assignment in class, and she was asked by her teacher, talk to somebody from World War, and this is 30 years ago, because a lot of these guys we've lost so many of that generation. And so they had this assignment, I think maybe she was in kindergarten or something, ask somebody in your family who's been in the military about their service and something they were proud of in their service, or maybe a situation that was very scary for them in their time of service. And so she asked my grandpa, who never really talked about the war.
Right.
A lot of those guys did not. And so he tells her about it, and he tells this story that I think my mom maybe knew, but again, it wasn't something that he talked about all the time. So he tells my sister about how, and he actually typed it out for her, and at the time he faxed it to the family because she was going to use it as a school assignment.
Okay.
And he was in his plane. They were having to ditch. They were over enemy territory. This is in France. And they realized that there wasn't enough parachutes packed on the plane. And so they weren't going to all be able to ditch. And so my grandpa was the co-pilot of the plane. The pilot and he decided, it was a pilot's decision. The pilot says, all right, myself and you, my grandpa's name is Jim, me and Jim are going to stay in the plane. We're going to try to crash this thing somewhere.
Yeah.
And the rest of you jump out because there was only enough parachutes for the rest of them. So the rest of the guys jump out of the back of the plane. And my grandpa and the pilot land this thing in a field and somehow survive it.
Wow.
They kind of get like knocked around in the process. They end up coming to, and then they realize that they're in enemy territory. And now they've got to spend a couple of weeks getting back to Allied territory. Yeah, and when you
Sorry, I mean,
no. But when you think about like all of the things that he had to go through, the crash, just being in war, surviving in enemy territory, making his way back so that someday he could survive the war and get back to my grandmother. And if none of that happens, I'm not here, and neither is my mom, and neither are my kids. You know, and he's 19 years old at the time. And when you think about the sacrifice that those guys made and the bravery required of those like very young people. It's just, I don't know, it floors me. Today's a day where I'm really
you're
astounded.
humble. I'm humbled. You're just even hearing that about your grandpa. You know, and it's not. I mean, the fact that they got shot down and had to crash the plane, and he managed to make sure all aboard were first and foremost putting their safety above all else. But I mean, the thought of flying through skies just filled with what they call that flak when the anti-aircraft guns are blowing up around you, and you're literally just waiting to be shot down. It's just a matter of time to be. That kind of courage and bravery is beyond what we ask of anybody in America today. I mean, I don't mean there are those who serve this country today that are involved in conflicts around the world. That, of course,
listen, anybody goes into the military, but especially back, you know, like you think about like World War II, where it was really a ground game. There was a lot of people on the ground. And just amazing. And their plane was called the Idiot's Delight, which is just great. All those old planes.
Beautiful.
Is it beautiful? I love it. Have you seen a show called Masters of the Air? It was on HBO.
I haven't yet.
Or not HBO. It was on Apple TV.
I know of it because I'm a big fan of Band of Brothers.
Yes.
But I know of Masters of the Air.
But you're a Band of Brothers fan.
I'm a massive Band of Brothers fan.
How often do you watch it?
I've seen the whole thing probably 3 times, and I've seen various clips of it. You know, if it's ever, it usually comes on around Memorial Day, around Veterans Day. It'll be HBO will make a nice gesture to make sure that gets reintroduced to a new audience of Americans. It's so brilliantly done, and what I love best about Band of Brothers are the interactions with the actual veterans from Easy Company.
Yeah,
you know, those gentlemen who talk about their, like you said,
it's
the stage of their life, what they went through.
That documentary style footage, the talking head stuff that they do at the end, where you're meeting all these guys and you're realizing who's been telling these stories.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, where the guy says, you know, my grandson asked me, "Grandpa, are you a hero?" And he says, "No, but I serve in a company of heroes." I know, but that's the kind of thing where like that's so important for people to see these days. I don't think people see that as much anymore these days. You know, and like Laura, have you seen Band of Brothers?
No, but I haven't seen most things.
You have to watch it.
Okay.
I mean, just like historically, just to get a sense of.
You know, that's a great point because most kids, and I don't want to beat the drum about education, but most kids haven't taken the time or haven't been given the assignment. We haven't, as adults, tasked them with learning about how we got to where we are today, in the best sense.
Yeah.
You know, not where we may have gone off the rails from different perspectives, but how we got to the land of the free and the home of the brave. And that's not just a clever saying. It's really what we are and who we are. Everybody should be required to watch because it's such a historically accurate. They took great care.
Spielberg, Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys know their stuff.
You know how that all came about because of Saving Private Ryan? Have you heard that story?
No.
So Tom Hanks was doing Saving Private Ryan and did the research required to make that movie as authentic as it should be, out of respect to the men who served. And he kept hearing about this one company, Easy Company, who just through the luck of circumstance ended up being in the middle of the absolute worst of all of it, from D-Day, from the Battle of the Bulge to wherever, into
just
Holland.
The through line is amazing.
This one band of brothers, this company was in the worst of the worst of the worst over and over and over again, and they looked into the story and found out so many more. They couldn't fathom how amazing these young men were, their dedication, their courage, their service. And that's how Band of Brothers came out.
Just amazing.
It is.
It's amazing. I guess, so this is my correction from my younger years where I was, you know what it was? I was afraid to say it. I was afraid to thank people because I didn't want it to come off as glib, like you mentioned. I was embarrassed of myself, and so I didn't want to put myself out there. And now that I see, like I was texting my neighbor this morning. He was in the Marines. I was just like, dude, thank you so much. I mean, like, if you know somebody in the service, send them a text. Or if you see somebody who served our country, just thank them. It's not a glib thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to do.